Welcome back to another Lazy Shell tutorial video. Today we're getting back into the Event Scripts editor. In the Action Scripts video, we covered the various action commands along with the basics of how to add commands. Today we'll be diving into Event Scripts themselves. Similar to Action Scripts, Event Scripts have a drop-down where you select the category of command to add. First up is Objects. Again, like with Action Scripts, this first category is probably the most complicated of the bunch. If you can get past these, you can handle most anything. Right off the bat, we have a pretty complicated one. Step 1 is to pick an object. Objects can be various NPCs in the level, Mario himself, the screen, or layers of the level. Just be aware that many commands don't work for the screen or level layers. That's reserved for very simple things, like just moving them around. Q lets you choose what exactly you want the object to do. This first one is probably the most important one, Action Q. If you add in this command, you'll see that this button appears toward the top labeled Action. If you click on it, it will change this category drop-down to Action Command categories. These are all those action commands we talked about in the last video. So from here, you can basically make an action script within an event script. You'll also see these action commands are nested under this main command that we used. I had mentioned this briefly in the last video, but you can use this plus or minus button next to it to collapse or expand these nested commands. This makes it easy to see which commands are part of a particular NPC's action queue. Back to the command. If this asynchronous box is checked, this tells the game to stop looking at any commands that come after this action queue until the commands in the queue are all done. You would want to leave this box unchecked if you wanted multiple objects to do things at the same time. Let's continue with this queue dropdown. Start Embedded Action Script. Functionally speaking, this isn't any different than a normal action queue. I won't get into the technical differences between the two, but suffice it to say, you can do what you need to using action queues. The creators of the original game used this embedded action script queue very rarely, if ever. Set Action Scripts allows you to change whatever the current object's action script is to the action script of your choosing. The difference between setting the script temporarily or not is that with the temporary option, if the temporary action script ends, the object will go back to using whatever action script it was using before. Just like with Action Queue, you have the option of making these action scripts synchronous or asynchronous. If you choose to sync them, you can manually unsync them with this option. There are also commands to pause, unpause, and stop these action scripts. Summon to current level makes the sprite visible if it was previously invisible. If you want the sprite to appear on the same spot as Mario, use the first command. Remove from current level makes the object disappear. Enable and disable triggers. Many NPCs within the levels editor will do something when you interact with them in some way. For example, some NPCs will trigger battles when you touch them. Other NPCs will talk to you if you press A while facing them. You can use these commands to turn these triggers on and off. Reset coordinates. Every NPC in a level comes with its own set of coordinates. It's got to go somewhere. If that NPC has moved at all, this command resets them back to those coordinates. Okay, now that we've finally made our way through this first command, we can finally start talking about the rest. Freeze all NPCs until return. An easy one to understand, this command will halt the movement of any NPCs, either until there's another command telling an NPC to do something, or until it gets to the return command, which marks the end of an event script. Unfreeze all NPCs is the opposite of the last one. If you want the NPCs to start moving again during the event script, use this. If object is present in current level. This drop-down has the same options in it as the first command we looked at. You'll see this drop-down again multiple times before we're through today. This command tells the game if whatever object you choose is currently loaded in the level, jump to a different address specified on this line. We talked about the basics of addresses in the animations editor videos, but remember, these 6 digits in brackets are a command's address. For commands that reference jumping to a specific address, you enter in the last 4 digits of the address you want to jump to. Also remember what we talked about in the last video. Event scripts are broken down into 3 sections. Jump to address commands can only be used to jump to addresses within the same section. Next, we have if Mario is on top of an object. Similar idea to the last one, the game checks if Mario is on top of the object of your choosing. If so, jump to this address. These same 2 commands exist in the action scripts portion of this editor. The game checks to see if 2 objects of your choosing are within a certain distance of each other. If so, jump to this address. This first one completely ignores the z-coordinate, which is height. For the second one to apply, they have to be on the same z-coordinate. If Mario is in air, simple enough, if Mario's feet are not on the ground, jump to this address. Similar to what I talked about in the action scripts video, you'll often see a command to pause the script for 1 frame immediately before this command. Then this command says, jump to that command, that pause script command. The result is the event script pauses until Mario is no longer airborne. Create new NPC. These commands let you choose a sprite packet to add at given coordinates. We talked about this one too in the action scripts video, but packets are basically specific sprites from the sprite editor that you can use these commands to summon to a level, even if that sprite isn't normally available in that level. This is how things like mushrooms and flowers that you see in chests are summoned. The difference between these 2 commands is that one lets you summon the packet to the same location as a particular object, while the second one lets you summon the packet to a location stored in memory. There's a separate command under the 7000 memory category where you can specify what coordinates to store in this location. If Mario is on top of an object, unlike this other command, which checks if Mario is on top of a specific object, this command checks if Mario is on top of any object. Basically, anything that isn't the scenery. If he is, jump to this address. If he's not, jump to this other address instead. This next command lets you remove an object from the level of your choosing. Or you can click this Is Present box to make the object reappear. This next one lets you remove an object's event script trigger. We talked about event script triggers earlier. Summon or remove object at memory address 70A8. This one is a bit tricky. Memory 70A8 generally holds information about the last NPC that was interacted with in that level. For example, once you hit a treasure chest, that treasure chest becomes the NPC stored at this address. You can use these commands to summon or remove that NPC. Similarly, these commands let you disable or enable the event trigger for that NPC. In the scripts for treasure chests, you'll often see this disable event trigger command as the first command in its script. This is what prevents you from getting a treasure multiple times. Similar to that other command, which lets you add or remove an object from a level, this command checks if an object is or isn't in a level. You can choose the condition. If the condition is met, jump to this address. Remember last object forces the game to hold the last reference object in memory. That way, if you do want to use any of these commands that reference address 70A8, you'll know what object is in that memory location. This next one checks if an object of your choosing is currently running an action script. If so, jump to this address. This one jumps to a particular address if the object is underwater, and this one jumps to an address if the object is in the air. This next one is a fun one. This creates a new NPC packet at the coordinates stored in 7010-15. along with running a new event script. Again, there's a separate command to store coordinate data to 701015. If for whatever reason the game can't do this, it can't create the NPC packet, like maybe there is no coordinate data stored right now, the game will jump to whatever address you specify below. This next command checks if a particular NPC in a particular level currently has their event trigger enabled or not. You can choose whether you want it to look at if the trigger is enabled or disabled, and then jump to this address. And this last one makes Mario glow, like when he gets a star. Shiny. And that's it for the objects category. Out of all the categories, this is by far the most complicated one, so don't feel bad if you can't understand a lot of this. I can tell you, I made my ROM hacks without using about 90% of these commands. But let's move on to Joypad. This is much easier. Both of these commands let you choose which buttons you want enabled for the player. The difference between these two is that the top one will reset the enabled buttons once the event script ends using the return command. The second command will keep these particular buttons enabled until you use another enable buttons command to change them. Next, we have party members. This first one lets you add or remove party members. It's worth noting that if you have someone in your party that is later removed, that party member still retains all of their equipment and experience when you add them back to the party. Also worth noting, before you people get too clever, yes, you can use this command to remove Mario from your party. Whichever party member is in the second slot then moves to the first slot and becomes the party leader and the ally that you control in the overworld. However, there are many events that specifically reference Mario and command his sprite to do something. If you have a different character as party leader, you have to change those events to reference that party leader, or the game will crash. Additionally, Mario has sprite sequences where he faces the 4 compass directions, when he jumps, and when he's swimming. Other allies do not. You would need to create unique sprite animations for the other characters if you wanted them to lead. So it's not impossible to have a different party leader, but know that there's a bit more to it than just this command. Equip item equips that item onto the character. I think the only time this command is used in the original is when you're awarded the Ghost Medal. This next one will subtract an amount stored in memory 7000 from a chosen ally's HP. Another one that's seldom used in the original, the only place I can think of where this is used, is when Toad teaches you how to use items in the beginning of the game, and he bumps into Mario, making him lose 1 HP. There's a whole category of commands that lets you manipulate the value stored at memory 7000. We'll get to that later. Experience plus equals packet will increase the party's experience by the amount of the experience packet. You can't talk about this command without also talking about this one right below. Experience packet equals memory 7000. This command sets a value to the experience packet, and then this first command increases your experience by the amount of that packet. Last, we have Restore All HP. This heals your party's HP to full. Next, we have Inventory. These first two commands let you add or remove an item from your inventory. You can choose an item using the drop-down. Coins plus equals will add that amount to the player's coin count. This next one does the same thing, but for frog coins. This one subtracts an amount from the player's FP equal to whatever value is stored at memory 7000. I mentioned this last time, but there is a whole category of commands that lets you manipulate the value stored in memory 7000, which we'll get to. These next two commands will store an item to your consumable inventory or equipment inventory. You can change what's stored in memory address 70A7 using other commands. Also, when you add a treasure chest to a level, you can set what value to store to this address upon hitting the chest. These next commands let you increase or decrease the player's coins or frog coins, increase current FP, or increase max FP by values stored in memory 7000. And then last we have restore all FP, which, you guessed it, restores your FP. Moving on to battle. This first command will force the player to engage in battle with the pack number stored at memory at address 7000E. 7000E can be manipulated using the memory category of commands, which, again, we'll get to. Every level has an assigned battlefield, which can be changed in the levels editor. When you use this battle command, the battle takes place at whatever battlefield is assigned to the current level. The second command is similar, but lets you specify the pack in the battlefield. An important note about battles. If you want the game to reset if the player loses a battle, you need to specify that in the event script. Take a look at this batch of commands. When the player wins a battle, memory 7040 bit 0 is cleared. This command immediately after the battle command says, if memory 7040 bit 0 is clear, which it will be if the player won, jump to this address, which skips over this reset game command. If you want the enemy in the level to disappear after the battle, you would have a remove NPC command. More importantly, you need to have a fade in from black command somewhere after the battle command, otherwise the screen will stay black after the battle is over. On to levels. This first command sends Mario to the world map at whatever location you choose from this dropdown. These additional properties down here are unknown. We don't know what they do. If you figure out what they do, please tell us. This next command sends Mario to a level of your choosing, at the coordinates and facing the direction of your choosing. There are some additional options down here. You can choose whether to display that level's message, which is chosen from the levels editor. You can choose to run that level's entrance event, which again is chosen from the levels editor. And you can have Mario's z-coordinate be bumped up by a half step. You'll see this used in levels where Mario appears on stairs. Without this, Mario starts slightly in the air, and you can see him falling down for a split second. To note, when transitioning between levels, you need to have a fade in from black command after Mario enters the level, otherwise the screen will just stay black. You can have that command either in the level's entrance event, or if you're using this command to change levels, you can have that fade in from black command listed right after this command. These next two commands involve properties found within the levels editor. Tile mods are modifications you can make to tiles or groups of tiles in the levels editor. You use these if you want to overwrite a piece of scenery with something else. A classic example is a door. Normally doors appear closed, but when you open the door, you would load in an alternate tile set showing that the door is open. Similarly, solid mods involve the physical layer of the level. This is what Mario interacts with. It determines if he can or can't walk somewhere, if there's a ceiling overhead, if there's water versus solid land, etc. Again, you would use these mods to overwrite a level's solidity with something else. Going back to the door example, if the door is locked, you would want it to be solid so Mario can't walk through it. Once the door is unlocked, you would modify the solidity such that Mario can walk through it. We'll talk more about these mods once we get to the levels editor, but for now, know this is how you can utilize these mods. And that'll do it for this video. There are a lot of commands for event scripts, and you don't have to learn them all at once. I figured it would be easier if I broke this up into a couple videos. We'll pick up right where we left off next time. As always, if you enjoy these videos, if you find them helpful, or if you just want to support the channel, please consider subscribing. If you have any questions, any event scripts you're having trouble with, something you want to learn more about, let me know and I'll do what I can for you. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.